Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Keep the Line Moving podcast, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration, and talk about inspiring guests. That's what we have this week. It's Dr. Annie Shadle. She is the Director of Mental Performance for the New York Jets. That is where we met. We worked together. I'll tell you what, it doesn't start there. Here's where it starts. University of Nebraska, Bachelor of Science. University of Missouri, Master of Education. University of Missouri, Doctorate in philosophy. That is how she got to where she is today. However, she also has an athletic background. She was a two-time NCAA national champion and former professional runner. You put all those experiences together and you have this story. It starts now. Dr. Annie Shadle, listen to this if you are in the leadership space or an athlete or anyone who just wants to increase the way you think. How did you get here? Take us to how you arrived, where we are today. What a story.
I studied Olympic medal winners and Olympic champions, so I've always had this fascination with athletes and coaches and environments, and especially how do the best of the best do what they do. So when I finished with my PhD, I wanted to work in a place where I was doing research, education, consultation, so really having that heavier hand in research, but then continuing to teach and work with athletes as well. So from there, I moved to San Diego and was doing a lot of teaching, doing some consulting, working with athletes, and then after doing coaching education, and then from there went to the United States Air Force and worked on the military side and did research, education, consultation with the Air Force. And then from there, woke up to a text message from my current boss and our performance director, Dr. Brad Deweese, and he wanted to talk with me about this position that they had at the New York Jets. And after talking with him and learning about his vision and what he was planning here, it was an opportunity that I could not pass up.
Well said. That's a great story. So your athletic background yourself, you were a two-time NCAA champion, and then you looked at running professionally, which you did. What was the fascination with Olympic athletes, as you just said, that got you, that was your dissertation with your doctorate, and then got you interested in the psychology of athletes? What is it specifically about the Olympic part of it that made so much sense to you?
Yeah, I think I've always just had a curiosity and been really drawn towards top performers or elite in whatever field, but particularly I love sports. And so I just love that athletic pursuit of pushing hard, working hard towards dreams, towards goals. And the thing about the Olympics is my background is track and field, so I have a special place in my heart for track and field and the Olympics in general. But whether or not my own bias in terms of loving the Olympic Games, there's something really unique about the Olympics that it happens once every 4 years. To make the Olympic team, you have to do it on that day. You have to place, for track and field, you have to place top 3 on that day. And so I think if you think about the pressure and if you think about having to perform in that moment when nothing else is going to work but your best, and those athletes that get it done in that moment, there's just so much richness in terms of understanding how people do that. And even how do they do it once, but how do they consistently do that and continue to perform and have sustainability in the field and sustainability in their professional pursuits. And I just love all of that.
When you uncovered that and studied those athletes, what common trait did all of them have? And is that safe to ask that question? Meaning, like, there's so many, we're all different. We all see things differently. We all process information. We train differently. But was there one common element that got them to where they were successful that one time that you're talking about?
Yeah, and it comes down to the individual person and their own determination. And obviously, there's a lot more factors into that. But if we look at the common theme, it was that person's self-determination and how they were able to navigate, how they were able to be disciplined, how they were able to stay committed to those goals, how they were able to make hard decisions, have hard conversations. But really, it was that ultimate drive and belief in self. And I believe we have people along our journey, like athletes have people along their journey that help them, but ultimately it's their journey, it's their goals, it's their dreams. And at the end of the day, it comes down to their own determination and their choices of what they're going to do with that moment.
So in your pursuit to understand each individual, when you would assess athletes and look at, how they are successful, what was your process? Like as you were studying it and then you got into your professional career, what was your process of uncovering how individuals process information, how they learn, how they train, what their psychology is? How did you go about doing that, understanding everybody? Was there what I know there's not one size fits all, but how would you go about understanding their core?
Yeah, so for my dissertation, I was really wanting to understand their stories. And so when athletes talk, right, I'll throw in some psychology terms, so we'll get a little bit of some education here, but they're a person's cognitive appraisal process, right? So the way that we perceive what's happening, the way that we make sense out of it, the way that we process, reflect, and then make different decisions or different choices that then align with our goals. So that's really important. And that first part of the research was really understanding different athletes, right? That psychological flexibility. So that's our ability to maybe look at things from a different angle, really connect to what's important to us right now, what's going to motivate us right now, what's going to help us get through this workout, get through this day, right? And so understanding what athletes had within them. And that was really rich for me to understand how athletes think, how they perceive, how they navigate, and what the common themes were with those that had that continued success. And then when I was with the Air Force, I was trained and began to understand how do you actually tangibly assess that, right? So not from narratives, not from stories, not from one's perspectives, which is really, really important to understand. But then how do I do cognitive assessments or personality assessments to really understand and measure these different elements that we know are important for high performance.
And what I love about that and what you just said, which is fascinating, is that you and I talked, prior to recording, was that this applies to life. It applies to leadership. It applies to
Right.
education and learning. And I've done some research on you, and you have correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a genuine love of people and understanding what makes them get to where they are in life and their success strategies. How much does that play into your daily life? And then we'll transition into your role with the Jets. But how much of that is a foundational element that really helps you in what you're doing for a living now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am just a really curious person. I remember I had one of my first jobs ever. I had a boss that told me that I have an intense curiosity. And it's true. Like I just think people are so fascinating and I love just hearing how people perceive things and their perspectives and the sense that they make out of their world and their experiences, and then just the element of the human spirit. And it's just really remarkable, right? We can look to different stories for inspiration, for motivation, but gosh, that pursuit of just the human spirit is incredible.
A curiosity is so valuable in any endeavor. And again, it can apply to any facet of life. So in the pursuit of understanding an athlete, so when you take your curiosity to the fringe, like, hey, hold on a minute, how do you garner trust in that process of understanding athletes? Because you can't ask too many questions until they're comfortable receiving. So how do you go about that process?
Yeah, I think building those relationships is really important. And part of my research and my studies, but also I think just my personality is wanting to connect with people. And that's the foundation, right? And even if we look to research, what's the secret to life and the meaning, having a meaningful, rich life, right? And what helps people live long in life. And it's actually the quality of relationships that one has. And I think just again that connection that you have some people take a little bit longer to build those connections and others are more open and trusting. And so I think it just takes more of the art of my work of being able to connect with people and being patient, but really building that like trust and care. Like I really work hard to be a compassionate person and be supportive, be kind, be good to people. And I think that helps me to build that trust in those relationships, because I hope that the guys feel, and I hope that our coaches feel and the organization feels that like I'm genuinely here to help care for people and help support people. And that's like the work that I want to do.
That's awesome. Art and science, you brought it up right there. When you come into work every day, what is your focus? And I know it varies between time of year. The combine will be different as compared to OTAs, and then when training camp starts, and then in season. But in a general sense, when you come into work every day, what is your goal?
Really, if I've learned anything in professional sports or sports in general, it's be ready for the unexpected. And so sometimes you have an idea of what might be going on or what things you need to tackle for the day. And so I have that in my mind, but then I'm also open to, what's going on. So I think just again that having that flexibility to meet the challenge of the day or meet the needs of those that I'll be interacting with, that's really important for my role.
And then obviously, as the season comes, closer to training camp and such, the players they're around more, and you're interacting with them more. And how do you prepare the players to engage in a season, which I don't know, fans understand football, they love football, but it really is a grind. How do you prepare the player for the season that lies ahead, which is 6-7 months sometimes? And what is like a general approach in that regard?
Yeah, I think we have an amazing staff here, and I think it's all of us, right? It's every interaction. It's all of us working together. It's all of us having that common goal. Positivity and optimism is really important, right? But again, I think it comes down to that support and care for one another. That all of us are in it together, and all of us working hard each day.
And how about energy? Energy is obviously needed each and every day, whether you're going to a team meeting or practice or anything. How do you help the player garner energy and keep their enthusiasm for which, as we said, is very difficult? How do you do that? How do you help them in achieving that, that stability?
Yeah. So I love motivation. I think motivation is really obviously important and interesting. And sometimes it is like, what's going to help me get through today or what's going to motivate me today? And really having that why, right? I know it's cliche that we talk about our why, but really it is that pursuit. And sometimes it's being a teammate, right? Being support for our teammate that needs us today, or being that positivity. And sometimes we need our teammates to bring that positivity and that energy too. And so all of us as a team, we take turns in terms of understanding where we're at and what we actually need. So I think that's a really cool part about being on a team, right? It's very difficult to go through things when we feel alone, and we can get in my mind, I believe that we can get through anything with our teammates.
Oh, that's well said. And then it's playing not just for yourself, but playing for the greater good, playing for the person next to you. How do you do that? Like, what are those conversations like? Understanding, this individual really wants to, do well for their family or do well for other reasons, but also doing well for the person next to you. How do you garner that understanding of, it's just so much bigger than me per se?
I give the credit to our players. Our guys are awesome. They know themselves, they're aware, they're motivated, they're driven. They know what they're going after. And I think that makes it really easy when you work with really motivated individuals. It makes my job pretty easy, right? So then it comes back to helping them remember, right? Helping them connect back to, why do you love football? Why do you love playing that game? How do you harness that love for your game? Right. And even when it's stressful and even when it's hard, being able to connect back to their why in those moments.
And the why, Dr. Annie, varies so much with each individual. I mean, my why
Yeah.
is different, your why is different, everybody's why is different. In your experience, do people readily know their why? Does it take a little prodding sometimes, or do they come back? Like, will you ask a player per se, and then they'll come back 4 or 5 days later after thinking about it, or is it just crystal clear in your experience with those you've dealt with?
I think the best performers know their why right away. And even if I think about draft work and listening in on those interviews and then watching guys throughout their careers, the best of the best know their why, and they're committed to that, and they hold that close to their hearts, and it's in their minds readily. Others, I think, maybe lose perspective or lose sight on that why, and maybe get distracted by all the things that come at you. And I think that becomes challenges for certain individuals. But the best of the best, our champions, our Hall of Famers, they know their why, and somehow they're able to connect to that daily to in that pursuit of their goals.
Dr. Annie, I've had the fortune of being around professional athletes for decades, and you and I have something in common, which is the curiosity. And I've had casual and formal, meaning like interviewing and such, but just casual conversations with people in Major League Baseball and the NFL. The difference between, let's say, college or amateur and professional is the way they think and the way they process information. The way they think is just next level. How much of that do you think is, inherent, and how much of it do you think they work on and increase their mental toughness? I was listening to an interview, as an example, with Kobe Bryant this morning, from in his early part of his career, and just the way he thinks is just different. How
Yeah.
do these athletes get there in your studies and such?
A lot of our guys study Kobe. I mean, he was brilliant in terms of how he thought about things, but the work that he did on his own mental game, right? So really understanding his own psychology and then the experiences that he had to then continually build that mindset, that Mamba mentality mindset. And I think that when we learn, right, we learn from other people, we learn from other top performers, we learn from each other in terms of sharing our own perspectives and our own experiences. So some of that is innate, yes, but also understanding these environments that we grow up in, right? A lot of these top performers and a lot of our professional athletes, they've been playing sports since, by the time they could walk, right? Or 5 years old, they started in sports. And so you think about those sport environments and how they continue to build some of these habits or build these mindsets from a very young age. And then as they continue to grow through their sport experience and then throughout the professional ranks as well, again, just that continued growth and that refining those skills in their mindset as well. So yes, innate, but also we're always continually learning to master some of these things. And we face different challenges in our athletic journey, and our ability to continually evolve and work on our own self. All those things, again, just continue to help athletes with their performance, but then also help them improve or have that consistency in sport, that we see that longevity in sport.
And that's a perfect segue here. I love this because an athlete, in just general terms, not just the Jets, just anywhere, hey, I'm going to go out, I'm going to catch, 700 balls from the jugs machine. I'm going to run gassers. I'm going to, lift all day long. The point I'm trying to make is working on the mental and emotional elements of one's game is monumentally important. So how do you get folks maybe that aren't familiar with that process to understand it? I know it probably requires a lot of patience, but how do you introduce, athletes into that system of thinking?
So even just like stepping back, if we think about performance psychology, sports psychology, and what that field looks at, right? So it looks at how does our mind affect our physiology, right? So our mind-body connection, right? So how do all of the things that we're perceiving, we're thinking about, we're processing, how does that actually affect my body, right? And so being able to understand our minds and being able to invest in understanding where our mind goes. And I tell our guys the best time to work on that is in the game, at practice, right? When those moments come up. So yes, we can talk and it's important to like reflect, but in that moment, right? How do I get through this, Annie? I think I had someone ask me like, how do I do that? How do I work on that? And it's like, well, when you get frustrated, that's the time where we're working on frustration. When you get angry, that's the time where we're working on managing those tough emotions, right? And how do we continually get our best performance out while managing some of those things, right? And so kind of what we were talking about earlier is oftentimes when we're in the game, when we're at these moments that we never have been in, that's our opportunity to work, right? So understanding maybe that fear that we have, that anxiety that we have, and instead of pushing it away, being more curious about it, right? And understanding, okay, there's a reason why this emotion is here. Okay, but what's the choice I'm going to make, right? I think it's 100% natural to feel fear, feel doubt. Oh gosh, like, can I do this? Is this going to work? How can I get through this? Whatever it is, right? So we do have these thoughts that come out or come up, right? Especially in those tough situations. But then it's understanding the choice that we're going to make, right? Am I going to be fearful, or am I going to actually dive deep into my courage, or call upon deep into my courage, and like step up and go through this, even though I know it's going to be scary and tough. Right. So whatever that moment is, like, those are the choices. Those are the choice points. I talk about choice points. Right. And what am I going to do with this choice point?
That is so valuable, what you just said, for anybody, an athlete, a leader, somebody in corporate America, whatever. That was so valuable. So let's try to help people here
Yeah.
directly. What are
Let's do
some
it.
tactics that folks can use to get centered and
Yeah.
not go to the fear zone? And we can talk about in a second here the relationship with fear and failure. But what is a
Yeah.
technique that could get someone centered and present to be able to take, a deep breath and move forward in a productive way?
Yeah. So I teach our guys I go from like 7 different mental skills. So if we think about our mental skills, just like our physical skills, right? So as we're physically working, we also mentally need to work, and that's why the two come together. So our kind of the foundational piece is focus, right? So where is my attention? Where is my focus? And if it's focused on that fear, if it's focused on that anxiety, it's focused, but it's on the wrong information, right? And so again, working on where should our focus be? What's going to help me right now? Where does my attention need to be? Where is it, right? And then how do I continually bring that focus back? And usually, right, it comes back to what do I need? What do I control? Which is myself, my attitude, my effort, right? And so helping them be present in the here and now, right? That focus. So working on the drill, working on my technique, whatever that is. So actually working on that attention and focus. I'll just kind of go through them real quick. Self-talk. So what's the conversation that I'm having in my head, right? So having an understanding of what is my self-talk? How am I thinking? What are those thoughts that are coming through? And are they helping me? Are they hurting me? And having an understanding and being able to work on that. Confidence. So different strategies to build confidence, protect confidence. Look for the data. I say look for the data, meaning like there is information out there that helps you to feel confident. If all I'm doing is focusing on my mistakes and all the things that are going wrong, that's not really helping me, right? So how do I identify those things that help me feel confident, help me feel good about what I'm doing? Another skill is goal setting, right? So what am I focusing on today? Whatever I'm tackling for the day, super important, right? To have that clear vision about what we're doing, where we're going. Mental imagery, important, right? So our body achieves what our mind receives. So being able to really have a clear picture and understanding of what we're doing, right? So whatever maybe the route is that we're running, whatever play, whatever our job is. So really being able to tangibly see that in our mind prior to that happening. And then compartmentalization, super important, right? So I love this mental skill because they teach Navy SEALs compartmentalization. So that means something doesn't go right, something doesn't go my way. How do I compartmentalize that and keep moving, right? So with Navy SEALs, something doesn't go perfectly right in a mission. How do I compartmentalize that, but stay true to the mission, stay true to what I need to be doing? And I think that's really important. And with that skill, it's not sweep it under the rug and never deal with it, but it's let me just put it on pause so that I can process that later. How do we manage our energy? And for our players and our coaches and our staff, how do we manage our energy through game day, through the week, through the season, right? And how do we take those moments where I call it mental rest. So, right, our days are hectic. They're long, they're tedious, right? But there are these moments where we can just take a second, close our eyes, do some breathing, just take a moment to give ourselves that like mental rest to help us continue on with that. So that energy management is important, even just as a filter of, okay, where do I need to just be better about where I'm wasting energy, where I'm conserving energy, what am I wasting energy on that doesn't really deserve my time or energy, and like how can I, better pull back into myself or better just kind of navigate some of those things so that I'm my best self when it's most important.
That seventh one right there is so valuable, energy management, for what you just alluded to in the leadership space. And
Yes.
folks think, I could keep grinding, boom, 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 go to that meeting, this meeting, that meeting, but to take time to understand how you're coming across to people and what your word choices are. But if you're fatigued, you're obviously depleted. So how would you advise a leader in the same space to be at their optimal level to manage their energy?
Yep. So a couple things. One, identify what actually charges my batteries, right? So what are the things that like give me energy, helps charge my batteries, the thing that I love, that helps me, and then what are the things that completely drain my batteries? And so when you can identify those areas that drain you, but then also energize you, trying to look at that balance. So if I've had a pretty hard, draining day or a week or a meeting, okay, what are the things that I can change or take the time in the next moment to kind of recharge those batteries? So whether that's a conversation with someone that kind of does that for you, or whatever element of your work that you really enjoy doing, taking those moments to kind of just take inventory of where you're at and being okay with boundaries, right? Like I need 10 minutes, go for a walk, right? Do a little breathing, do a little meditation, call a friend, laugh, whatever, watch funny YouTube videos, just to kind of help yourself reset, and being okay with taking that time for yourself. Because it's, if you take 5 minutes out, little time out for yourself, or a little time in for yourself. If you don't like the word time out, you could say time in. So that you show up as your best self.
That is incredibly valuable, like we said, to anyone who's listening. So you brought up fear and failure. And I'll just give you a little anecdote just to put some context with it. I remember Jerry Rice, the Hall of Fame receiver. He used to say that what motivated him was fear of failing. He did not want to fail. He cared about how his uniform looked. He cared about how he practiced, and he was meticulous with everything. So how do you make failing energy for these players and people that are talking with you and trying to understand their psychology, to work for them and not against them? And I know you just gave us 7 great tactics, but it was something in a simple manner that would help somebody if, like, gosh, I just can't get by, I can't get by this, I can't get my mind to think this way or whatever. Is there any little something that is a key to success?
Yeah, I think the fear of failure is really interesting, and I do think that the top performers have that, right? We have this like fear of failure, but there has to be a healthy relationship with it, right? And I think sometimes that fear of failure often paralyzes people, just because they get too far down the road, right? Versus understanding it. And it kind of comes back to that perception, right? How am I perceiving this? Do I perceive this as it's helping me? Do I perceive this as it's hurting me? Just another example, like anxiety. If I have performance anxiety prior to the game, do I perceive that as like, oh no, this is bad? Or do I perceive that as like, oh, this is my body's way of naturally responding, and my elevated heart rate and all those things are actually going to help me perform, like this is normal, or this is helping me, right? So I think that perception and that perspective is really, really important. So if I perceive that this fear of failure helps motivate me, because whatever their belief is about that, right? So I can say for myself, does fear of failure motivate me? Yeah, because I really care, right? I want to do well. It's important to me that I do well. I like challenges. Are you going to fail along the way? Yeah, but are you going to look at it as like a hard failure? You're terrible at what you do, or are you going to look at that as like, ah, man, okay, I have to learn on that day. I had a mentor say to me, we should never be afraid of the days that we fail, because those are the days that we learn the most. And I love that, because it's really true. Because again, it's that perspective of, am I going to take this as, I just got to roll it up and I can't do this? Or is it going to be, okay, that wasn't a fun experience, but okay, this is what I learned. This is how I'm going to get better. I'm going to keep moving on in my journey and have that belief in myself to keep going.
Love that. That's very inspirational. I love that. And your mentor is right. Is if we fail, we learn, and that's a positive. Okay, Annie, I want to be respectful of your time, but let me ask you this final question. If you were to give one final piece of advice to people out there to just take their mental performance to another level, what would you say?
One, it's identifying what do you want, right? So what do you actually want to be better at? And again, just having that clear thought. And even if you think about, if you go through your day and what are the things that kind of trip you up, right? What are the things where maybe you don't keep your cool, where you don't keep your composure, or even just you kind of catch yourself thinking negatively or being negative, right? Or the kind of what you talked about is that energy that you bring. And so a lot of that is just like self-reflection. So I guess if anything, the advice I would give is take the time to self-reflect, right? Take the time to think about your life and where you're going and what you're doing in those interactions, and those people that you're around. Because sometimes even as a leader, if we think about how does my personality or how does my presence affect those that I work with, right? So sometimes we might have some areas of growth there, right? So in our interactions, in how we support other people, in being positive, in being energetic, all those things definitely matter within winning organizations and within winning cultures.
Outstanding. Perfect. Annie, this was great. This was perfect. That was so good.
This was so fun.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
we thank Dr. Annie Shadle very much for being our guest. Very insightful. So many different topics, so many different takeaways. I hope you agree and you enjoyed it and you will make what she said useful for you. And hopefully we can start with this part, your why. Do you know your why? As you sit here, stand here, running, however you're engaging with this podcast, do you know your why? I will tell you my why. My why is to help you in any way that I can in the leadership space, understanding from these guests any little nuggets that you can take away to make your life easier, to help you empower people, to understand yourself, to be more engaging, to be more empathetic, to understand what it is that you can provide the world. What is your unique talent? How do you get there in the leadership space? That's my why. It's kind of long. That's okay. All right. For our producer, Paul Salazar, we appreciate you engaging with us each and every week. Please leave a like or subscribe. We'd appreciate it. You know we would. And we'll see you next week with another great guest. I'm your host, Chris Gargano. This has been Keep the Line Moving.
We thank you for listening to Keep the Line Moving. We would love it if you subscribed or left a review. For more podcast episodes, check out our YouTube page. If you'd like to work with the Gargano Leadership Group, check out our website. This has been a GLG production, copyright 2023. For our podcast producer, Paul Salazar, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal. Have a great week, everyone.